Hello and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Julie Sawchuk, here with an episode of Building Without Barriers. I'm pretty sure this is going to become a regular thing. I'm having a lot of fun introducing new people and talking about accessibility. So thank you for being here today. My name is Julie Sawchuk. I'm here in my living room in my own accessible home here in Blythe. And I have a guest with me today, Greg Ward. And we are going to be talking about NewGround. And Greg is the president of NewGround Canada. And I have been doing a little bit of work with Greg and his team at NewGround. Hi, Greg.
Hello.
Thanks for being here today. Can you introduce yourself to those people that are watching today?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I am president of NewGround, but I'm an architect. And NewGround is a design and design build firm. We have a specialty. We focus on financial institutions, particularly credit unions, from coast to coast. We work from both islands, Newfoundland to Vancouver Island, and we've been doing this now for close to 25 years. So it's been an interesting journey, and we're always learning, wanting to improve our craft. And we'll talk a little bit more, but that's kind of how we started.
Well, yeah, like 25 years of building financial institutions, that's a lot has changed with banking in the past 25 years. And I'm sure you have seen how the space that a bank occupies and the spaces that are needed within a bank and communications and all of that. And before we get to that, though, I'll tell our audience how we came to meet each other. And that was through our builder, both of our builders, actually, right? Because Casey Boven at CMB Construction, he built this house for me. And I know that he's actually on site doing some building for you right now. And I talked to Casey and told him that I was really keen to start talking to architects and designers about building accessible spaces. And he's like, oh, well, I'm going to introduce you to Greg because I think you and Greg would have a good conversation. And so he introduced us and you decided to reach out. Tell me why you thought we should connect.
Well, it seems like a logical thing to do. I mean, accessibility is something that, since I began to actually, once I left school and started practicing, it was there, but, somewhat a mystery, not really, too well defined. Essentially, I'm a graduate of the School of Architecture here in Waterloo. And that was just pure design thought. It was an intellectual pursuit. There was really nothing practical to it, which was great. They're trying to get you to think as a pure designer. And the beauty of University of Waterloo, though, is that they have a co-op program, and it was there I started to come across, and I'm talking about mid '80s right now. Mm-hmm. Some accessible design. I did some work with the Ministry of Housing, for example, but we relied on the building code, which when I began, there really was nothing about what they call barrier-free design.
Right.
And that's a name I'm not even crazy about. The barrier part is sort of a almost a negative connotation. I like accessible design as something much more. But anyway, it wasn't there. But I did sort of gradually start to pick it up and look at it. But what's always struck me is that it's very cold, and when you talk to anybody about it, it's about a person in a wheelchair. But as working with you, you pointed out there's so many different disabilities. Whether you're blind, you're deaf, whatever the case may be, all these considerations need to be taken in. And
when we were talking, I was talking with a bunch of your staff, actually, right? And we've done some sessions together. What was one of the aha moments that you had, like I never thought of it that way before?
I think that was through a lot of the examples. For example, you showed work that you did at Cowbell in Blythe, and that's a beautiful facility period. I don't know the architect who did that, but just in terms of the accessibility, it was very well done, and kind of really, as a designer, you know, designing for accessibility shouldn't be just something you have to do. It's something that yes, you need to do, but it should be done elegantly. It should be something that's seamless into the overall design.
And that's one of the things that I love talking about when I do talk about Cowbell, is because so many of the features that are accessible in that building, you don't even realize that they're accessibility features. So I totally agree with you that accessibility doesn't have to be that in your face kind of, institutional looking or feeling cold, like you mentioned, kind of design. And what has changed for you in the past couple of months with your thinking about design of your own buildings?
I guess a couple of things. One, we still have a lot to learn.
Always learning, yes.
Always learning. The other thing too is realizing that the building code, which as architects and builders and so forth we rely on, just scratches the surface. And and even then what's really interesting is looking together, our team and yourself, we looked at some examples, and one in particular I think of is airports. Their washrooms, they're very cold, they're very clinical, and a lot of them don't work.
Yeah.
So what's laid out by the code, you think as a designer, okay, I don't know anything about barrier-free design, so here's this barrier-free section. Experts must have looked at this, so it works. It doesn't necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and that's something that I've learned. Code is the bare minimum, and yeah. Code is what is it that somebody said to me about code is what you have to meet in order to not go to jail. And I'm like, right, okay. I never thought of it that way. So certainly building beyond code, which is something that I talk about a lot, is very applicable. And the idea of best practices and having the discussions like we've had with the people that are going to be using the facilities, especially the people with disabilities that are going to be using the facilities, and what is it that they need in order to make their life easier when they are there. So can you give me a specific example from one of your plans or job sites where you've been looking at something differently?
Well, actually, yes, it is interesting since starting to work with you, and then we did 3 training sessions with you. Mm-hmm. And that was also interesting too, just in terms of mentioning to the team, like just saying we've got this opportunity, are you interested? And it was hands down yes. It was just something that they were all eager to do. And now since then we've been working on 3 different projects, and each one we've brought it in. One of them is fairly I'll say hands off client. They trust us, they just want us to go ahead, so we worked in terms of the overall design. It's going to be beautiful. We're just finishing the concept and kind of just actually getting it out for tender right now in terms of going from concept to contract documents. But we introduced accessibility, and even within the staff kitchen.
Nice.
We've got the microwave lower, and the counter space works and everything else like that.
Yep.
And we basically put it to them, just saying this is what we'd like to do. And you could see a smile on their face, and it was a case of this just makes sense.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and I think that's often the thing. It's often introduced to a client who doesn't know what they do. Okay, by the way, we've got to do 2 washrooms. One of them's got to be barrier free. Oh, is that going to cost a lot? Turn it around, approach it just saying this is what we'd like to do, and here are the benefits.
Yes.
And they gave the comment that many do, just said, well, we don't have anybody on staff right now, but doesn't mean we're not going to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. The population of people with disabilities that are unemployed or underemployed is enormous. And by creating accessible spaces for people to work is a total game changer. And so speaking of people that you work with and, bringing those new ideas to the table, has there been any pushback in terms of, well, we've never done it that way before. Why should we start doing it now? Has there been any pushback from either the people that you're working for, or the people that you're working with, just sort of questioning anything?
No, definitely within our team. We've got a great team. They're eager, bright, talented designers, and to them it's just another opportunity, to improve what we do.
Yeah.
In many ways, it was interesting. A few years ago, people were really sort of looking at green design.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that's always been close to me. And again, we would bring it to the table, and people would just say, "Yeah, it just makes sense." Accessibility really is another thing that we need to look at, and rather than sort of the overall environment, this is the interior environment. Making sure that people using a building, it shouldn't be anything special. They should be able to use it without the staff having to prepare any different way of treating someone who's coming in the door.
Exactly.
But no, our staff has been no issue. And as I mentioned with that one, which is sort of perhaps the furthest that we've been able to push it, because others have been more not as broad a renovation. No pushback.
Nice.
Yeah.
And the idea that, I know what the answer to this question is, but I want to know if you agree with me. Does knowing about accessibility now help you or your clients save time and money in the long run?
Yes. Again, thinking from the practical standpoint in terms of, being designers, I've seen over the years that, the code will suddenly finally come along, and that will happen. Again, environment is, a case in point. Now the National Building Code and the Ontario Building Code and BC, they're all sort of, really enforcing the idea that you've got to design a good shelf for the environment. It's going to be the same with accessibility. Mm-hmm. So rather than having to go back and make any changes, right away, there's a cost, savings, doing it now. But then I think also, as creating the design that can work seamlessly with the staff who are using it and the people, the end users, the customers, who are using it, that saves, time, money, stress, all the way.
And ideally, it should be bringing more people into, your financial institution as an example, right? If people know that they can come in and do their business in a manner where they're not having to expend extra energy. I know I spent a lot of time talking to you guys about how inaccessible spaces really just end up costing physical energy, and whether that's physical energy or mental energy in terms of planning, all of that. You're going to bring more people into your institution, and that should in the end help your client. Are there any myths or common misconceptions that are out there in your field in terms of architects or designers that's stopping people from creating more accessible spaces?
Well, again, probably from a lack of understanding what needs to be done. I would think the most common question that a customer or a designer would have would be cost.
Yeah.
So it's going to cost more, and when you really sort of build it in from the very beginning, from your design thinking, whether it be use of a material at a curb cut itself, the layout of the washroom and so forth, it doesn't need to cost anything more in terms of dollars, just a little more thinking all the way through it. So when it's executed, it's all done easily.
And don't you think too, now that you have started to look at accessibility in your designs that you're working on right now, that's just going to carry forward, and it no longer will require additional thinking. That's the thing about accessibility, is it's always a little bit of a moving target, but you're building it in now, and that is just gonna stamp into all of your plans from now on. All of your staff are going to be thinking that way. And so in effect, it should be seamless.
Absolutely. And the other thing with as a designer, we did a multi-unit residential project as well, and that was an interesting learning curve too, because it was a case, everything was designed, everything was put in place, and then had to go get the appliances, appliances that would work with the design. You may recall this discussion.
Yeah.
And suddenly finding that nothing was available. It was, in fact, we were asking you where you got yours, and you got like the last one.
Yeah, my wall oven. That's right. The very last one.
So as a designer, if you're doing something like that, then, you plan ahead. Just saying, okay, we're going to have X amount of units. It's going to take, we do this all the time with lighting. You want a special light fixture. And you just see right away, you can look at it and just say, okay, that's going to be, 3-4 month delivery. So, let's make sure, let's order it on time and everything else. And so, you start to think about that from accessibility standpoint. If you need something different, plan for it now.
Yeah, fixtures, whether they be tall toilets or wall ovens. You're right, that planning ahead is really important. One of the things that my co-authors and I were looking at when we were writing Building Better Bathrooms was how to do a shelf in a washroom that can be placed in an accessible location where it's not going to be like a hazard that you're going to run into or, hit with your wheelchair or hit with your head or whatever, but it's also in a convenient location. And so one of the things that we were talking about was a recessed shelf that's sort of within reach of being seated on the toilet. And the one manufacturer that makes something like that, you have to order 100 at a time. So if you're like you, where you're building one financial institution that has one universal washroom in it and you need one recessed shelf, what are you to do, right? So that idea, if anybody's out there is watching and is in the business of, fixtures for accessible washrooms, there is a need for things that they're just not being made or not being made in the quantities that make it affordable for somebody to apply in their project. Yeah.
Right. And as it becomes more and more just commonplace thinking, common sense, thinking, products like that should be more available.
Yes,
right.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So looking back on your career, what do you wish you had known about accessibility like 5 or 10 years ago?
Definitely, there are a lot of mistakes made over time, and inattention, I'd say, to a lot of design. Quite often as a designer, you might look at a teller counter, for example, that just say, okay, maybe we'll have a sit-down section over here, but then he sort of, there's the debates. Well, is it going to be used? How often is it going to be used? And what does that mean? And how are everything going to work out? And sometimes the client might even just reject it, just saying, no, we'll just move the person into an office,
right.
which they're changed differently. So probably a lot of regrets, not knowing what we know now, that we can't, that we now the goal I think is going to be to make it seamless, so that it's not really apparent. It's just part of the design. Get over that awkwardness and get over the fact that, oh yeah, the code says we have to do this.
Yeah, because we've got to stop looking at the code as this is the way we need to do it. We need to look at it from the person perspective. Yeah, and so having these kinds of conversations, I think, is one of my favorite things to do, because I love seeing that little light bulb aha moment when people go, right, I never thought of it that way before. Is there one thing that really surprised you that you didn't know about accessibility before we started talking?
From a practical standpoint, I would say it was your bathroom design. Just again, following the code and realizing how the location of grab bars and so forth didn't work, And also another little story of yours, how grab bars often don't work because they're not installed properly.
Right.
They come off first time they're being used. So, that was kind of a real, oh my goodness, really got to think about that in terms of aha.
Yes. Yeah.
And,
My hated thing in the code is the range in height of a toilet. I think it's like 430 centimeter or millimeters to 490 millimeters. Like that's a huge range in heights of toilets. And when you're struggling to get off the toilet, it needs to be tall. And that's what a lot of people don't get is they just, oh, well, the code says it's 430, so I'm putting in a 430. Yeah.
And it's interesting too, just looking at buildings. There's one that we've been kind of helping a client look at over time. It was designed in the 70s, and
Oh,
it was really it's fun, to look at. What was the mindset at the time? The mindset was stairs. What really defines a building is stairs, and so there's stairs to the lower floor and stairs to the upper floor from the parking lot area, meaning it's totally inaccessible.
yeah.
And at the end, the day on their own, they put in a ramp. It's about 100 feet
Holy.
just to get around. It just, but that really shows. In the 70s, it wasn't even an issue. It wasn't something to think about. And still come across. I travel a fair bit, and you see quite a bit. And most hotels are not bad today. You can walk in with whether it be one of the big chains or whatever. They've done a lot of thinking. The barriers aren't there. But you come into some of the older buildings, it could be one of our our clients, before we're renovating kind of thing, and just see that design, 70s, 80s, and sometimes even new buildings.
Oh yeah. Most of my examples that I talk about when I'm talking to designers and architects and builders, most of them come from hotels. And I finally found a hotel that worked and that was done well and was done right. And that's going to be one of my case studies that I'm going to write about and do a little video to show how it's totally doable. You just have to think about it. But thinking about it means knowing about it, right? So what would you say to people in your industry about accessibility and what they really need to know?
Well, I think there needs to be a broader discussion on it. I mean, for us, again, it's always been there as designers, but we've got a great client who just basically said to us, we got to really look at this. And of course, in Ontario, there's AODA, the Accessibility for Ontarians Act, this Ontarians with Disabilities Act.
Yep.
And sometimes I even wonder in terms of how aware people are of that, in itself. I know, there had to be a new audit in 2019, which went in last year. So, a lot of, we're looking at it. But, we have a fairly proactive client who just said, we got to, really start to think about this. And it was wonderful to, have, the client, say that. And so that, that probably got, us more than anything else, just saying that, yeah, we got to do this. And, we were introduced to you and, to us, you're a thought leader in terms of accessibility, the whole industry. So it's something that, I'm happy to, be here and talk about it because the discussion has to broaden. There isn't a great awareness at the moment.
And that's the thing that I like to talk about in terms of that awareness piece, and that the people who are doing the designing and the constructing are very rarely the people that are actually using the accessibility features within a building and bridging that gap, right? Having the discussions with the users and telling the stories to the people doing the design and the construction so that they can understand the why behind the premise of the code, for example. And, just talking about grab bars and the fact that I have pulled grab bars off walls in bathrooms twice. And why the L bar is the best way to do a grab bar beside the toilet now, and it's part of the code as well. But talking about who uses the horizontal component and who uses the vertical component, and some people use both, and just the why behind it really makes people go, okay, right, I get why it needs to be placed at this height and screwed into the studs, or better yet, screwed into backing behind the drywall. And actually, I was just watching a video yesterday, and the person doing the video was saying, screw the grab bar into at least one stud. And I'm thinking, at least one stud, let's get two. Come on, at least two studs, please. I'm not going to pull any more grab bars off the wall. So speaking of grab bars, Greg, I'm going to get this into the mail to you. This is the latest book, Building Better Bathrooms, written by myself and my co-authors, Samantha and Jane. We did the book launch last week, and we had 125 people in the bathroom, right? We went up to Cowbell and hung out on StreamYard just like we are here today. And we had 125 people join us. So it was pretty exciting. And I just heard from the printer, he's got them running on the printer right now. And I'm going to be able to get that out to you this afternoon in the mail. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for working with me. And thank you for agreeing to come and have a chat with me today. And I look forward to seeing your new projects. And like you had mentioned about working on a tropical island, I want to do that site review.
Yes, it's still a credit union, but it's in the island of Dominica, and
nice.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the site visits.
Yeah, although it is finally being sunny here today, which is nice, but it's nice to dream about getting away, isn't it?
It is.
Mm-hmm.
Looking forward to getting back to normal.
Yes. Well, and then we could actually maybe meet in person. Wouldn't that be lovely?
Absolutely.
Thanks very much, Greg, for being with us today. And I'm going to say farewell to our watchers and our listeners. Please feel free to send me your comments or visit Building Better Bathrooms to get your copy of our newest book. And I look forward to talking to you again, maybe in a week's time. I'm going to see how organized I am about doing regular chats with people about accessibility and talking about building without barriers. So thanks for joining me today. I'm Julie Sawchuk. You can reach me at julie@juliesawchuk.ca, and you can find my book at buildingbetterbathrooms.ca. So have a great one, everyone. Talk to you soon.